The most savage philosopher of all time, 8-minute video? Wait a minute, he's a hero, it's a banger. 8-minute video, the most savage philosopher of all time. Let's hear it.
Of philosophers, we generally imagine someone who writes long, complicated passages within the depths of their study. Maybe we even imagine the classy existentialist talking futility over a cup of coffee in the Saint Germain. And then there's Diogenes, a homeless man who urinated on people, lived with dogs, and masturbated in public that we still talk about to this day. To put it simply, this guy cared little for the opinions of others. In the greatest of accounts, Diogenes would roast the philosophers and the rulers of his age, only to leave them dumbfounded by his unassuming wit. Where do we even begin with this man? Especially when he has no authored written material preserved and...
I feel like you can say this about any Twitch chatter. So far, I'm not sold. They all think they have the unmatched wit that is tearing down the philosophers of their age, but they're just fucking, you know, Socrates nuts or whatever. It's not, it's not as savage or impressive as they think. It's not.
And thus, we must rely on secondhand written accounts of his absurd life. Since the events of his life are so blurry, let's lay out his philosophy, which is more of a doing than written system involving acting out what you believe in, more so than other philosophies. Many consider Diogenes to be the founder of cynicism, an ideology that is so unconventional. Many scholars find it difficult to call it a school of philosophy. Cynics believe, as do the Stoics, that they have found the shortcut to virtue through their certain lifestyle, although they also address that this shortcut is actually really hard to attempt. We can see this difficulty in living your life as a cynic, as its very name suggests a dog-like existence. The word cynic in Greek is komikos, which also means dog-like. This naming either came from one of the first of the cynics' nicknames being similar to the word dog, or from Diogenes, who would shamelessly perform his private acts in public, and was later deemed Diogenes the dog. There are
That is crazy. He needs to stop drinking off in public. I think there's no philosophy component to that. And everyone calling him you dirty dog is not an impressive...
Specifically one account in which, when seen living amongst the dogs and appearing just as dirty as them, he was called a dog by passerbys. Not being one to contest such a statement as being a dog and his philosophy is quite virtuous, he embraced the name by urinating on the name callers, as a dog would. To not get sidetracked, the ethics of this philosophy are really quite simple. Live in accord with nature. Cynics see society as overcomplicating everything and instead embrace existence in nature as a dog would. Diogenes is quoted as saying, "Humans have complicated every simple gift of the gods." In this statement...
Was this guy just a furry? Just a dog furry? He just wanted to do everything like a dog. It doesn't make you... There's nothing magical about that. Pissing on people is not higher order thinking. Nothing he said so far is like different from do it like a dog.
We see that for Diogenes, his morality means returning to the simplicity of the natural world. Okay, now, let's get to his life. Diogenes may have originally helped his father, a banker in Sinope. Due to archaeological findings that have unearthed defaced currency in and around where his family operated, as well as his fleeing of the town, many believe the Cynic was exiled for attempting to devalue the currency. The Greeks and Persians had Sinope divided at the time, so their actions may have been political. According to text, Diogenes was told to deface the currency.
He's a counterfeiter that pisses on people. This is your goat? This is your philosophy? Goat.
By the oracle at Delphi, and after first taking that to mean literally deface it, later believed that the message was to deface or challenge the currency being social customs. This is where he went to Athens. It is said that when he came to Athens, he had a slave named Manes. Diogenes said, "If Manes can live without Diogenes, why not Diogenes without Manes?" and let him go, his first act of self-sufficiency. He was then attracted to the teachings of Antisthenes, although he was beaten by his hero with a stick after being a little too obsessed. Antisthenes is, according to Diogenes, the first cynic. It was also time for Diogenes to find some nice real estate. Diogenes lived in a clay wine jar on the street, his only possession a wooden bowl. When he saw a boy cup his hands and drink water, Diogenes threw away his wooden bowl, realizing how materialistic he had become. Then Diogenes heard about this shitbag Plato. Plato claimed that he could simply define man by stating one that is bipedal and featherless. Diogenes promptly plucked a chicken and stated, "Behold Plato's man." This led to Plato...
Yeah, I mean, it kind of fucking mog him there. He did kind of mog him. That is pretty based. That is like the rap battle bar that would get everyone going, oh. Like, that is a goated.
Revising his definition to include the term broad-nailed. Throughout his storied career in Athens, Diogenes became the talk of the town, wandering the street in broad daylight with a lamp, claiming that he was seeking good men, but only found vile and brutish creatures, eating at a marketplace, a custom that was very looked down upon at the time, simply because he was hungry, living with dogs, and, of course, masturbating on the street. The last one, when he was tried before a court for it, led him to defend his act by stating, "If only it was so easy to end my hunger by rubbing my belly." Despite all this, he was quite well loved in Athens for his naked and pervy shenanigans, acting as a designated crazy uncle to the strict and serious Athenian populace.
Funny.
Then, one night, he was taken by pirates and sold as a slave in Crete. When asked by his owner what his previous occupation was, Diogenes, instead of freaking out, told him that he governed men. He either said this because he generally saw himself as a king in Athens, or because the phrase govern men and teach men were quite similar and this was a dad joke level pun. His owner loved this and hired him as a tutor to his kids in Corinth.
Oh.
Even then, he didn't stop. Upon hearing that an army was approaching Corinth, he witnessed the citizens of his village running and screaming in a frenzy. Not wanting to be left out of the fun, he began rolling his clay wine jar up and down.
He still had it?
When asked why, he stated that he was just being as useful as the citizens. This act simultaneously represented the futility of free...
What a fucking... Give it a rest. Give it a fucking rest. What a fucking prop comic, dude. Really? Now's the time to do your fucking... What if someone doesn't ask you, by the way? You just fucking roll that shit around all day for nothing.
Out over things that one has little control over, a very stoic and Sisyphean concept, and that he was offering a solution that the citizens will have to move their homes to avoid conflict. Now we come to the more famous and well-known of Diogenes' incidents with others. During his stay in Corinth, Alexander the Great was said to have been passing by. Hearing of the strange qualities of our beloved philosopher, Alexander met Diogenes and asked him if there was anything he could do for him. When confronted by such an opportunity, a man of vast wealth and power, and arguably the most popular figure of that time period, Diogenes stated, "Yes, get out of my sunlight." To this, Alexander replied in admiration, "If I were not Alexander, I would wish to be Diogenes." Diogenes, indifferent to the remark, retorted, "If I were not Diogenes, I would also wish to be Diogenes."
That's pretty based.
There is another far more savage account.
That's
of this
pretty
meeting.
based.
When Alexander spotted Diogenes searching through a pile of bones and asked why he would do such a thing, Diogenes stated that "I was searching for the bones of your father, but could not distinguish them from the bones of slaves."
Ooh.
Diogenes may have lived out the rest of his life tutoring, or he may have spent it on the streets of Corinth. Even his death is kind of ambiguous. Certain accounts establish that Diogenes simply held his breath and died. Some believe he became sick from eating raw octopus or suffering infection from a dog bite. Whatever finally took Diogenes may never be known. When asked about what he would like to happen to his body upon his death, he asked to be thrown over the walls of Corinth with a stick so he could battle the wild animals trying to eat him. When asked why he would need a stick as he will be unaware of anything, he said, "If I lack awareness, why should I care what happens to me when I am dead?" We see that even as he faces his mortality, Diogenes continued to push the customs of his period, a consistent advocate of simplicity.
I think he said, "When I die, make sure to, in a few thousand years, make a cool YouTube video about me so streamers can get react content." And it's kind of an honor to be part of his dying wish in 2025. It really is. He had a lot of foresight to say that.
He has the highest virtue. Now, despite the admirable and historical fame of Diogenes, it should be not necessarily suggested to seek out this life. In modern times, Diogenes syndrome is a medical term used to describe people that are shameless, apathetic, socially withdrawn, and hold extreme self-neglect. This is a slight misnomer, as the self-neglect of Diogenes was, if anything, an act of high self-esteem, just in his own way. If he was around today, he may even state that the...
So in a way, Asmongold is the modern day Diogenes. In a way, streamers are philosophers, and this guy, I'm sorry, but I call him balls and strikes like I see him.
The aforementioned syndrome is another product of social construct. Or he would...
Oh, fuck. Nietzsche, the man who vibe-checked God? Where's the popular ones here? Nietzsche, the man who vibe-checked God. I'm kind of interested.
In 1882, a sickly German man penned these words, "God is dead, God remains dead, and we have killed him. How shall we comfort ourselves, the murderers of all murderers?" This is perhaps Nietzsche's best-known contribution to popular culture, though his name has also been used by Nazis, motivational speakers, and edgy teenagers who think that he was a proponent of nihilism for some reason. Nietzsche is as famous as he's misinterpreted, and because of this, it's only natural to provide this, although still embarrassingly reductive guide to the life and philosophy of the man behind the mustache. Nietzsche was born in Prussia on October 15th, 1844, the exact same day in which King Frederick Wilhelm of Prussia was celebrating his 49th birthday,
Okay.
hence Nietzsche's first name. At school, Nietzsche excelled in Christian theology and created
As one
Germania,
does.
a music and literature club. He also learned Greek, Latin, Hebrew, and French in order to read the primary
That's
sources of his studies.
Crazy.
Nietzsche soon became obsessed with Friedrich Hölderlin, a long-dead obscure poet who suffered from schizophrenia and lived in a tower for 36 years straight, writing poetry about the simple things.
What a fucking life, dude. That guy would be a Twitch chatter today. Isn't that crazy? And his poetry would be copy pasta. In modern day, his poetry would be copy pasta, and he would be... It's just weird how there's parallels. You know, things rhyme. It rhymes throughout the years.
And playing the piano. Like most artists, people only liked his work after his death. He also became friends with another poet.
How many of you are locked in a tower right now that you haven't left for decades? How many of you are at the top of a tall tower that you've been locked into? I'm literally Rapunzel.
And raging drunk Ernst Ortlieb, who would introduce him to the music of Wagner and introduce himself to an early death due to alcoholism. Mr. Ortlieb was found in a ditch a mere few weeks after meeting the young Nietzsche. Nietzsche studied theology and classic philology at the University of Bonn, and after only one semester, completely lost his faith. After reading Feuerbach's The Essence of Christianity, as well as his increasing admiration for the pessimistic Schopenhauer, Nietzsche found himself on the edge of nihilism. Impressively, Nietzsche was later...
So he's a college freshman atheist Redditor at this point in his life. At this point in his life, he's a college freshman atheist Redditor, and he's going to change the world.
Offered the
Before
chair
it
of
was
philology
cool,
at Basel at the young age of 24, and is still actually on record as the youngest tenured classics professor. Notably, before he moved to Basel, Nietzsche renounced his Prussian citizenship. He would remain entirely stateless for the remainder of his life. During this time, Nietzsche also served during the Franco-Prussian War. Scholars believe that his frequent visits to the brothels likely led to him contracting syphilis.
That'll do it.
Nietzsche then met Richard Wagner in 1868 and soon developed an absolute man-crush, due largely to their shared interest in music and Schopenhauer.
God, what a hairstyle.
However, Wagner became a little too mainstream for Nietzsche later on, championing German culture in his music with an indulgence that sickened him, so he broke their friendship. Nietzsche was also suffering from poor health at this point. He was nearly blind, had terrible migraines, violent indigestion, broken bones from horse riding, and carried various diseases. Due to this...
I'm not religious, but I could see how someone who was formerly religious would have all this and then say that God is dead. You know, you get dealt this many bad cards, you must be like, there's not a big man upstairs looking out for me.
He resigned from his chair in 1879. Nietzsche's years of independence were very productive and sound quite nice, really. Living off of his pensions, he would travel to Switzerland in the summer and Italy and France in the winters. He would begin with Human All Too Human in 1878, and would create a major work each year until 1888.
That's crazy.
He also met the love of his life, Lou Salome. In fact, he liked her so much he proposed to her 3 times. Although Nietzsche never did get a yes, nor really any non-Platonic affection, he did stick around, and both he, Salome, and his best friend Paul Ray would tour the countryside looking to set up a commune.
Bro, no wonder. El Riz got triple threat diseases.
Unfortunately, this would never come to fruition. Nietzsche was eventually...
Dude, he's on LiveJournal right now. God is freaking dead. God, fuck my Chungus life. God is dead. She didn't even fucking write me back.
Eventually abandoned by his friends when his admiration for Salome became far too much to bear. After this, he became hooked on opium and lived in isolation in the mountains,
Yikes.
writing Thus Spoke Zarathustra in 10 days. These were very sad and lonely times for Nietzsche. His books weren't selling, and he was unable to obtain a job at a university. Meanwhile, his sister traveled to Paraguay with her anti-Semitic husband and attempted to establish a new Germany. Nietzsche thought this was very stupid.
Yeah.
In the midst of this dark time, Nietzsche found the strength to publish many of his books on his own dime, and he even saw his health improve. However, on January 3rd, Nietzsche reportedly witnessed a horse being flogged in a street corner in Turin, ran to the horse, threw his arms around its neck to protect it, and then collapsed. This moment, although not entirely proven to be something that actually happened, generally marks Nietzsche's gradual decline into madness.
Okay.
He would begin to write letters signed as the Crucified One or Dionysus, and would command the German emperor to go to Rome to be shot.
Okay.
Sadly, after 2 strokes and pneumonia, as well as a plethora of mental issues and disease, Nietzsche passed away in 1900, almost entirely obscure, with very few friends and a sister who would change his life's work to reflect her own agenda.
What?
You're probably wondering what sort of philosophy could emerge from a guy who lived such an eccentric and depressing life such as Nietzsche.
I didn't know he was totally
one of his
unknown
greatest
during his life.
contributions is his persistent skepticism. Not only did Nietzsche criticize religion and attack previous philosophies, no, his critique launched an attack on the very central aspects of morality, down to the seemingly universal values of good and bad. In Nietzsche's time, morality was no longer attached to religion, but instead was considered to arise from rational thinking and reasoning.
Okay.
However, Nietzsche criticized this view, arguing that such rational morals were still deeply entangled with religion and historical
I
continuity.
guess who are the thinkers of... It just feels like this guy in a different time, like if it was today, nothing he... everything he said would seem so just normal online behavior, just like angry guy online.
Contingencies. In fact, in the Genealogy of Morality, Nietzsche provides 3 treatises devoted to examining the evolution of central moral ideas. Nietzsche argues that our modern form of good versus bad actually happened due to an ancient slave revolt in morality. The masters or elites believed that they were good due to their nobility or exclusive virtues that could only be obtained by those in certain elite classes, such as courage in an elite military class. The slaves were powerless and unable to be good, and so came to resent their oppressor. In order to reclaim power, the slaves devalued everything their masters had, and that they could not have, and therefore vilified their oppressor, claiming them to be evil, making the humble lives of the slaves good. The slaves would argue that the causes behind the master's power are evil and that humility is voluntary rather than something the slaves were forced into. Nietzsche writes, "Our morality amounts to a vindictive effort to poison the happiness of the fortunate, instead of a high-minded, dispassionate, and strictly rational concern for others." Hence, Christianity and democracy for Nietzsche are little more than universal extensions of slave morality due to their obsession with freedom and equality. Notably, his reading of morality doesn't make our idea of good versus evil sound all that rational. Instead, democracy is simply seen as the child of Christianity, according to Nietzsche, by which that is just an extension of slave morality, a morality based upon the erosion of power through jealously taking down the powerful. Here, the rise in European materialism, the popularity of secularism, and the advancement of the sciences, including the theory of evolution, led to Nietzsche's harrowing conclusion. Because the belief in the Christian God has become unbelievable, everything that was built upon this faith, propped up by it, grown into it, including the whole of our European morality, is destined for collapse. God's death then welcomes an era without values. Everything that was thought to be sacred and eternal is now seen merely
Shell's
mortal
right.
and arbitrary. Nietzsche believed that the death of God will lead to the loss of a universal perspective and truth, and subsequently, nihilism.
I see.
Most people focus on this aspect of Nietzsche's argument, claiming that he is a nihilist or advocate of nihilism. However, here's what he has to say about nihilists. A nihilist is a man who judges that the real world ought not to be, and that the world as it ought to be does not exist. According to this view, our existence, action, suffering, willing, feeling, has no meaning. This, in vain, is the nihilist's pathos, an inconsistency on the part of the nihilists. This inconsistency is the fact that the nihilist is still willing or wishing or valuing something, even if that something is nothingness. Beyond this error, Nietzsche also doesn't really think this nothingness is something.
Just tuned in, don't know what's happening. All I know is ATRIOC is putting them liberals in their place. I'm having a live debate with a well-known liberal, Nietzsche, today. And I'm going to tell him, he's talking a lot of shit about God. But you know who fucking makes the sun rise in the morning? God. Checkmate.
Something worthwhile. For him, what makes the human species amazing is not what we believe in or value, but that we can value to begin with. Nihilism is the greatest crisis we face, and hence requires the greatest of values to recover from. But wait, what about the whole pleasure versus pain system as a basis for morality? In The Last Man, Nietzsche imagines the utilitarian man. The utilitarian man spends his days maximizing pleasures and minimizing pain, something that we can now probably call the modern lifestyle.
Right, smoking
However,
weed,
Nietzsche
playing
points
PS5.
to the fact that pain is usually required if one is to do anything worthwhile. He believes we'll suffer either way in life. We can either let life make us suffer, or we can make our suffering, channeling it into something we find purpose in.
Okay.
For him, the hedonistic man is a pathetic man who is simply content and nothing more. Sure, it's a solution to nihilism, but not one that Nietzsche is really all that a fan of.
Okay.
Here is Nietzsche's solution to nihilism, the Übermensch, or Overman. He believes that the Overman will be the next stage in evolution and will be the creator of new values that we cannot even imagine. The Overman shall be the meaning of the earth. Man is a rope tied between beast and
This is Twitch chatter shit. It's like, I'm so sad about scrolling TikTok and smoking weed and I feel depressed. I want to be a Giga Chad. This is just lonely Twitch chatter worldview.
Overman, a rope over an abyss. What is great in man is that he is a bridge and not an end.
He would be looks maxing.
Now, this is kind of extreme and not entirely useful for those who are suffering from hopelessness and nihilism. How can you deal with life suffering now without relying on...
Do you guys think Nietzsche would be a good VTuber? Like, he probably could do the entertaining part of stream, but obviously, yeah, the problem with the... So you think he could, like, VTube? With a voice changer. Like a higher pitched, ah-ya-ya type voice changer.
Becoming the next stage in human evolution. Nietzsche, who personally struggled with depression and nihilism, had much to say about living life to the fullest, even in the face of meaninglessness. Firstly, he suggested to love our fate.
Nietzsche.
He writes, I want to learn more and more to see as beautiful what is necessary in things. Then I shall be one of those who makes things beautiful. Amor fati. Let that be my love henceforth.
Don't call me a fatty, all right? Just because I had a big meal.